Hey everybody, happy Wednesday. I hope you're all having a really good week. It's me, Robyn, back again. Animation feedback. Wait a minute, something's happening. Okay, let me turn off that title because it's not supposed to be there. I hope you're all having a really good week. It's Wednesday, we made it this far. Well done to you, whoever you are out there. You deserve a pat on the back just for getting this far in the work week. So today's portfolio that I'm giving feedback on is for Jade Hofstetter, who's a player on the rookie site. Yes, girl, get it? I'm kidding. Like, obviously, being a player on the rookie site does not mean you're actually a player, but that's what I think of when I hear the word player. So anyway, before I divert myself too much, let's look through the reel. I'll play it through for you as usual. Awesome. So obviously, I saw on your profile on the rookie site that, oh, wait a minute. Oh, you can't see it. Okay, cool. I saw on your profile on the rookie site that you are a generalist. So obviously you want to show, all the different things that you can do, and you can obviously do everything. So you've got animation, you've got your modeling and scenes, texturing, compositing, your rigging. So you've got all your stuff in here, and it can be difficult being a generalist. I'm also a generalist because you want to show like every aspect of what you can do, obviously. But I would recommend just adding a little more animation to your reel, because you've just got like a few shots at the beginning, and most of them are with the same rig. And it would be really good just to show, that you are comfortable working with other rigs, not just this one that you did one exercise with, because your reel is what you're sending to companies. They're not going to go and look at like your other profiles and stuff. They're going to look at the reel that you send. So I would just suggest adding a few more animation shots and slightly different exercises, because you've got two here of a guy opening a door. Obviously, you're trying to show that you can, have him doing the same thing in different moods, but it would be better to have a different rig in a different situation portraying something else, if you get what I'm saying. It's still really good though, and it's great that you can do all the stuff that you're showing here. Also for the still parts, I would add just something to make it like a little more dynamic. So even if you just have like a gentle scale up or a slight pan or just something there to kind of keep up the momentum and the interest of the person watching the reel. But let's just go back to the beginning and we'll just go through it step by step. And I can give you some more kind of precise notes on it. So I see this says pantomime at the bottom. So obviously it's meant to be like quite expressive, quite exaggerated, which is great, it is. And you can get some nice emotion from it. You get that he's being like all cocky there as he comes in. So that's conveyed really well. As he opens the door straight off the bat, like the first thing that stands out for me, I'm just changing the color of the pen here, is this hand. It really grabs your attention as looking quite awkward there, because it just doesn't seem like a natural pose for the hand to be in there. Yeah, I would just, usually, that hand's not doing anything, so it would be more relaxed. It would just be kind of there by his side. At the moment, it's just kind of aimlessly chilling there, like open. So that hand is a bit of an attention grabber at first. And because the camera is obviously, focused quite closely on him there, it is one of the first things that you see because you're looking right at him. As he opens the door as well, this arm here, I would have the elbow closer into his side, so it's kind of coming like that direction. Just because generally people tend to keep their elbows closer to their body. They don't tend to kind of pivot them out that way. So I'd bring the elbow in closer, and then the action of opening the door would then be in quite a nice smooth arc. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing here actually. Yeah, so he'd open the door, and then it would open like in a nice sort of arc to the side as he opens the door. And you always want to be aware of, arcs in the movements of your characters. Arcs are your best friend, basically, when you're animating a character, unless they're a robot or something, because then they have like quite square, rigid movements. But any sort of organic character, you want to be using arcs as much as possible, pretty much any movement that they have. Also, just the way our joints are set up, it's more comfortable for us to move in these nice, smooth, round arcs. So that will help your character look a little more natural. Okay, as he comes in also, he's already kind of looking to the side there. I would just, when the shot starts, I'd actually have him looking down at the handle first. So because, obviously you have to look at the handle to grab it, and that will just, add a bit more interest there, because he's kind of just staring to the side for quite a large amount of time here as he comes in. It's kind of the whole shot, he's kind of staring to the side, like he already knows what to expect, like that there's people there before he's even come in. So I would have him looking down at the handle first. As the door opens, he kind of looks up and to the side there. Sorry, the timeline here does a weird thing with these brackets, and I don't know how to clear it. I need to practice with sync sketch more. Okay, so sometimes you're not going to notice certain things until you sit and look at a scene like a lot of times. But I don't know if you notice here, as he comes in, his body does a sort of a zigzag. I think it's, if you're working in Maya, it's like on the Z axis. It's either the Z or the X axis over there. That part there, let me just play it again for you. Oh wait, now I can use that bracket thing, that'll work. I think it loops it there. Let me bring that in a little bit more before it cuts. So there. There. Hey. Gosh, this thing is annoying. That movement. His shoulder kind of, it goes to the side, and then it moves back this way, and then it kind of goes back that way. So it does this very sort of stiff looking zigzag movement as he walks in. And again, you want to be using arcs. I'm sure that if you looked at the curves on the graph there, you would see that movement happening on that axis. If you just looked at that axis of the body moving forward, you really don't want that sort of thing to happen. So I would just clean that up a little bit there, have it a lot more smoother as he walks through. I get that you're probably trying to, put in that weight adjustment. Obviously, he's putting his weight into the door handle as he walks forward and changing the weight on his foot, but it's just a very irregular sort of movement for him to be having there as he walks forward. As he walks in, I would also just have the shoulders. It's kind of hard to see from this angle. It looks as though you might have them tilted a little bit, or the shoulder is slightly higher than this one, but I'd maybe exaggerate it just slightly more. And then his hips are quite stiff and parallel here. So I would have a bit of contraposto in here, actually. Where's that line? And tilt the hips just for a bit more of a dynamic shot, and it'll just look like a more natural movement there. So contraposto is when you've got like your shoulders going one way and your hips going the other way for a more dynamic pose. So I would just tilt your hips there and maybe just lift the shoulder a little bit, or even just maybe not lift this shoulder because then you're going to lose the negative space here, but then just lower this shoulder a little bit and then tilt your hips the opposite way, because obviously his weight is on this leg right now as he walks in. And then it's obviously going to change to the other one. So then your hips and your shoulders would then move counter as he moves forward. Oh gosh, you see what this thing does. What the hell is happening here? Why do you hate me so much, Sync Sketch? Trying to make me look bad in front of my friends. Okay, so as he walks in as well, it starts happening here before it cuts to the next shot. But his hand lifting like this. You also want to be aware of, as well as arcs in your movements and stuff with characters, you want to be aware of kind of keeping nice, smooth, flowing lines. Obviously, sometimes you're going to have an awkward character, but that's because they're an awkward character, and then they're all like jutting elbows and knees and stuff, and they look awkward and stuff. But when it's just a normal character, a normal person, you want to tend to have like nice long lines and curves and stuff. And here it's a bit of an ugly sort of pose here. And what would actually happen is when you're opening a door, you're putting all this power and energy into pushing it open. And once you let go of the handle, that power and energy is going to still follow through on that movement as you let go. So he's not going to just let go and then bring his arm back like that. He will follow through on the action, let go of the handle. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing here. That's the problem with these cameras. I can't see what I'm doing. So he's going to push through, his arm's going to follow through, and then it's going to like sort of lift as he releases that energy, as he lets go of the handle. So you've got that nice smooth movement, and then the arc as it comes up, and then he's going to bring it back into his body. Not as obviously exaggerated as what I'm doing, but I'm just trying to show like what I mean here. So his arm should actually be like outstretched over here as he walks through, because it's also actually quite jarring to have that sort of right angle of his elbow and then his wrist pointing the opposite way. So I'd keep it straight here, possibly still actually on the handle. And then here he lifts it a bit here. As it moves forward, he'll bring it up in sort of like a nice smooth arc. The wrist will kind of have a bit of like a follow through on that. So the wrist will be slightly bent as it comes up. So he would actually, he'd let go. He would start moving his arm up first, and then he would let go, and then his arm would come up, and there would be that overlapping action on the wrist as it comes up, and that'll give it a nice smooth movement as it comes. Because at the moment, this is quite an ugly sort of silhouette to have of your character. And the same thing here with this jutting elbow and this hand also, the wrist is going the opposite direction. It's quite a jarring look. It's not like an attractive pose to have, and it just doesn't really look that natural. You want to try and avoid those sort of right angles to the joints. The hand also here, it just looks quite unnatural and stiff again. So I would have it like maybe here with the hand dragging back like that. I don't know if you can see what sort of perspective it's at, but it would be a lot more relaxed and sort of dragging through there as well. His legs are, I think, a little too bent as well over here. Because, as you're walking, I know he's doing a sort of a strut, so he is a little more bouncy on his knees. But as you step, even if you're doing a strut, there is a moment where your legs are not fully extended, but a lot straighter than what they would be, unless you're like sneaking up on someone or something, like literally crouching down. But he's not like literally crouching here. It's very cute how he kind of like struts and does that little at the end. It's got a lot of character, and that's a really cute touch there. And be careful, his body is kind of just looks a little too unnatural over here with his hips tilted so far in that direction. His hips are very tilted and his shoulders are very rigid. So I would not rotate them as much backwards as they are there. And then as he steps on this foot, again, the knee is still very, very bent throughout that whole like transferal of the weight and stuff. It really works here. He walks forward and then he sort of, that's a very nice little thing where he does that weight and stuff. That's very nice. So I would try and just sort of mimic that with this step here. So have his knee straighten as he steps forward. It's almost like he's not taking enough of a step forward. And it's almost as if he's standing on a step or something there, or like he's stepping on his tiptoe and keeping his leg bent. So, you know, even when you're walking like that, you're still going to step onto your heel first. So his leg should be extended as he steps there, and then he can bob back down on his knees, and then, you know, the rest of the walk can continue there. And then over here, just for that end bit, I would have a little more sort of overshoot on that action as he brings his arms up. So he would bring them up and then be like, you know, so just have them go slightly higher up and then settle down, and have some, you know, secondary action on the hands so that they would come like a few frames later, just offset those a little bit there. But that whole movement is very nice on the whole at the end. It's very cute. So we've got, you know, a similar sort of action happening here with a guy opening a door, just in a different way, with different emotions. He looks quite scared here. The perspective of this arm looks a little strange. I think it's just maybe rotated a little too far this way, I think, towards his body. I would just pivot that a little bit so it's more forward, because it looks really sort of like thin and just strange at that like total right angle to his body there. His shoulders are nice as he pushes the door there and puts his weight into it. That's very cool. I would just watch the hands on the door handle there. They look a little slippery there. It's like they're not really gripping the door handle. They're just sort of swiveling around on it. It's very expressive. His face looks great. I would just maybe offset the eyebrows a little bit there. They're twinning quite a bit. There's a lot of constant movement happening here, and it almost looks like there are no key poses with in-betweens, if you get what I'm saying. It's almost as if they're all just sort of, it's going from like one to the other, and there's no distinctive key poses here. There's nothing, you know, there's no part where it like settles for a bit so you can grasp what is happening in the scene and sort of register it before it moves on to the next one. It's just a lot of constant sort of movement happening, if you get what I'm saying there. So people don't really like have constant flowing movement. There are split seconds where you stop and think, or like as you're putting pressure on the door handle, you know, there's going to be a moment where, you know, not much is happening as you're pulling down or something. It's not this like one movement flowing into another. Especially here as he comes through, there's a lot of that, like his head sort of wobbles here as he comes through there. And then he turns, and then the rest of his body is moving quite a lot, and then his head turns back. So here I would have his head, as he's looking, he doesn't even really have time to look at anything before he's moving on to the next thing that he's looking at. So I'd have him look back. His head would stop there while he looks, have a bit of like eye dots as he's scoping the scene. And then he can turn and kind of like push through. Obviously his body can still be like pushing through the door there, but just as his mind, as his eyes are looking for whatever danger is coming, you would have his eyes at least look around a bit more before he turns back to what he's doing there. And I would actually have his head rotated down a little as he pushes, because, you know, he's putting that movement into his shoulder, looks back, comes through. You can have a nice arc there in that movement as well. And then when you cut to this scene, his head can still be kind of down and then look up as he comes into the room. But that particular head movement there, I'm going to try and limit it just to that, just so you can see which one I'm talking about there. So right before he looks back, so I'd say there. There's sort of like a little head wobble there. So I would keep that a little more steady as he's coming through the door there. He could be looking down, and then his eyes can dot up as he scopes the room to see if there's like any danger or anything in there. And then as he turns back, have him still, you know, keep his head turned back while he checks again what's happening, because at the moment there isn't any time there for him to actually look. So his body's looking back like as a perfunctory sort of, I have to have him looking back sort of thing, but he doesn't have any time to actually register if there's anything there before he's turning his head back again into the other room. Again, the follow through on the door handle, especially on this hand here, because he is using that other hand to push the door handle down. So again, the fingers would still be on the handle as he pushes. He'd start pulling his arm away, the fingers would kind of drag, and there would still be that follow through on that movement there as he's like pushing, and then he lets go and he brings his arm back like that. And I'll just put a little more animation in the hands and the fingers in general. Like, hands are really, really important with animation. People often focus more on facial animation because they think that's the main thing that's conveying emotion. But that's why there's whole courses on like body mechanics and stuff, because it's still really important. And fingers and hands especially can be really, really expressive. And they're very important in making an animation look really believable and like make you feel things. There's a little too much rotation happening with the shoulders here as well. Obviously, you need some rotation in it, but it's just a little too much at the moment, the up and down there. And this arm here, this whole part where it kind of goes up that way, like this action that it does, I would take that out and have it actually, it can either stay up by his side and just have a bit of like a wrist movement there as he looks, but I wouldn't have it coming up to the side like that. It's quite an awkward movement that it's doing. It's almost as if he wants to grab the door frame, but he doesn't quite do it. It's kind of like that particular movement doesn't really serve a purpose or make sense there. And again, the follow through here, the fingers would lift last, so the fingers would stretch as they let go of the handle there, and just have a bit more of a smooth curve here. Have that secondary action on the wrist. So as the arm moves, the wrist is always going to move like a few frames behind, because there's going to be that follow through overlapping action on the wrist as it comes behind the arm. Okay, let's look at this one. So these sorts of actions and stuff are really difficult to get right with timing and stuff, and for the most part, the timing's pretty good. The main thing that stands out for me here is weight. Obviously, it's really difficult. This is good. As he's running, that's great. The weight looks good. It's a little bit of jankiness with the knee here, especially here where it overextends a bit. That's quite because it's literally just straightened for one frame. So it looks a bit like a glitch or a mistake there. I just wouldn't extend the knee fully over there. I'd keep it very, very slightly bent. But otherwise, this for the most part is quite good. I would also just here with this arm, just have a slight bend to the elbow there. Because I know in real life, I mean, you are going to have like a straight arm and stuff, but just here from this angle, it just looks a little off. It looks a bit like the rig is getting pushed to its limits. That's a great jump. This part here is what stood out for me, the weight there. Because, I mean, you can see here, at first it's like his weight is kind of on the stick a bit, but just, you know, obviously the weight wouldn't be on the stick like this. There's no way that this angle with one arm would be supporting all of this weight. So I would just be careful of knowing like where your weight is at any given time. If he was putting his weight on the stick, he'd have to still keep this hand on to kind of put that counter pressure onto the stick, if you get what I'm saying, to actually have it bear his weight. So as soon as he lifts his arm off the stick there, then it looks like the weight is wrong there, because there's no way he would be able to actually keep his balance with that sort of movement there. So he would need to transfer his weight back onto this leg a bit. So he would have to move counter to that there. And then he kind of swoops back to come back up. But then that movement back again there also just seems a little off, because he kind of goes backwards rather than pushing straight up from his leg. He goes back the way he came. This kick and jump is good. I just noticed here this arm, as it straightens, it's really stiff as it goes like that. It's like this very rigid, stiff arm there, which it wouldn't be either. So just watch that. You know, if he's taking it off the stick, it's gonna stay bent and come through in an arc. It's not just gonna come straight out. It literally just goes straight down from the stick like that. And then as he brings that arm back in, again, that elbow, I would just rotate it so that the elbow is coming in closer to the body there, because that's another sort of like awkward movement to have there. So as it's coming back, it should be more like that. And this knee probably like slightly bent. Obviously the foot would have to rotate to accommodate that knee also. Obviously, sometimes some things, you know, from the angle you're working at and looking at it looks perfectly normal, but because it's 3D, you always have to be conscious of what your poses and stuff look like from the camera's view, because that's what really matters. So I'm not sure if you just did compositing here, like the effects and stuff. It looks pretty good. So like I mentioned in the beginning, over here on these sorts of scenes, I would just add a slow drift. It would be really cool if you could show your process. So just if you had even like, you know, the various stages of production here. So if you had just the model and then the wireframe and then the texture over it and then maybe the lighting over that, that's quite a cool thing to have in your show reels when you've got just stills to show. It looks good though, the lighting looks good. The shoe looks good, the leather on it looks good. This ball here, I can't tell what it's actually resting on, what surface it's resting on. Otherwise it does look good. So yeah, so exactly like here, this one. So you've got your wireframe and then you've got the texturing. It would be cool if you added another layer with the lighting over that, just for a bit of interest. It's good to keep it dynamic. You don't just want like dead still frames in your reel. Yeah, so you did the same thing here with the wireframe and stuff, compositing the background in and everything. That looks really good. So you can show you could do a bit of rigging as well, which is really cool. Can't really say much about it. Looks like it all works. That's why you're showing it, right? Awesome. So it's a really good reel. I mean, you can show all your skills here and it all looks really good. So, you know, most of my notes were on the animation stuff, really. So that's maybe something just to work on a little bit, include some different shots. But on the whole, it's really good. So well done, Jade. And thanks for submitting your reel. And I hope that it was helpful. And to everyone else as well watching, I hope that it was helpful. I hope that you learned some things. And I will see you guys next week. Thanks for watching. If you want to see some of my videos on my YouTube channel, it's Robyn O, ROBYNO. I do videos on the animation industry, you know, tips on animation, how to improve animation, the sort of common mistakes, you know, new animators make, advice about the industry, pros and cons of being an animator, that sort of thing. So you can check out some of that stuff on my channel as well, if you want. So have a good week, everybody. Cheers.